The night Harper Delaney's life shattered wasn't loud or messy. It was quiet. Too quiet for the kind of heartbreak that would scar a woman forever. The tiny Manhattan apartment she shared with Brad Nolan still smelled faintly of the pasta she'd cooked for their anniversary dinner. The candles on the table were still flickering, melting into uneven pools of wax. She had dressed up for him, even curled her hair the way he liked, hoping maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to each other tonight. He walked in late, smelling of expensive whiskey and someone else's perfume. Harper didn't want to believe it, but the truth was written all over his face. The man she had built her world around wouldn't even meet her eyes. "Harper," he said flatly, tossing his Mont Blanc pen onto the counter. "I can't do this anymore." Her fingers trembled around the edge of the table.
"Do what?"
"This life, this struggle. I need more. I deserve more." He adjusted his cufflinks, avoiding the dinner she'd spent hours preparing. "You don't have connections. You don't have resources. And I'm done holding myself back." The words struck her harder than any slap. She'd never thought of their life as a burden he carried. She'd worked hard, saved carefully, never asked for anything.
"Brad, I love you,"
she whispered, voice cracking like old glass. He gave a small dismissive laugh. "Love doesn't pay for the future I want." She stared at him, stunned.
"There's more to life than money."
"Maybe for you, not for me." He grabbed his phone, the latest iPhone she had saved months to buy him, and slipped it casually into his pocket. "Cassandra Rhodes offered me a position at her firm. A real future. She believes in me." Harper felt the room tilt. Cassandra Rhodes, the venture capitalist who appeared on magazine covers, photographed beside private jets and glass towers. She had heard rumors about her and Brad, but she never dared believe them. Until now. "You're choosing her?" Harper's voice was barely a whisper. "I'm choosing the life I deserve," he replied coldly. "A life you can't give me." The candles sputtered in the silence that followed. The warmth in the room vanished, replaced by the icy truth. He hadn't fallen out of love. He had outgrown what he thought she was worth. Brad walked out without looking back, closing the door with a soft click that sounded louder than thunder. Harper stood frozen, staring at the empty space he left behind. Her heart ached, yes, but beneath the pain, something else stirred. Something ancient. Something powerful. Because Brad Nolan had just walked away from the one woman in New York he never should have underestimated. Harper Delaney, heir to a billion-dollar empire. And he had no idea what storm he had just unleashed. The morning after Brad walked out, Harper Delaney woke to a silence that felt heavier than any heartbreak she had known. The Manhattan sun seeped weakly through the blinds, casting pale stripes across the tiny apartment that once felt warm, now stripped of color. She lay there for a long moment, listening to her own breathing, trying to understand how everything could collapse in a single night. Harper wasn't the kind of woman people noticed at first glance. She didn't flaunt herself, didn't chase attention, didn't adorn her life with designer bags or sparkling jewels. She wore simple sweaters, kept her hair in soft waves, carried the same worn leather tote she'd had since graduate school. At work, she was the woman who stayed late, who double-checked numbers, who remembered birthdays. Kind, gentle, always giving, always the one people leaned on, but rarely thanked. And it was exactly that quiet strength that Brad had mistaken for weakness. She sat at the small wooden table, staring at the cold cup of coffee she'd poured, but couldn't bring herself to drink. She thought of her mother, the only person who had ever truly understood her. A gentle soul who raised Harper far away from the glare of the Delaney family wealth, choosing peace over power. Her mother had taught her humility, taught her that kindness mattered more than status. And because of that, Harper grew up believing that love, real love, was something you earned through sincerity, not money.
Brad had commenced to see that. In the early days, he loved her simplicity, her softness, her optimism. But as his ambition grew sharper, he began to view her gentleness as dead weight. The more he climbed, the more he resented her steady pace. By the end, he wasn't even trying to hide it. Harper pressed a hand to her chest, feeling the ache swell. She wished she could hate him. It would have been easier, but heartbreak never worked that way. She still loved the man she thought he was, not the one who walked away. She took a shaky breath and stood up. If there was one thing her mother taught her, it was this: when life fractures you, you don't stay broken. You gather the pieces, even the sharp ones, and you rise. Harper didn't know it yet, but this was the morning her rebirth began. Manhattan had always been a city of contradictions for Harper Delaney. Beautiful but unforgiving, dazzling but cruel. That morning, as she stepped out into the crisp air of the Upper East Side, the skyscrapers towered above her like silent judges. Yellow cabs rushed past, horns blaring, while well-dressed professionals hurried into glass towers, clutching Starbucks cups and MacBook bags. Life went on, indifferent to the fact that hers had just fallen apart. Harper headed toward the office building where she worked, a sleek, mirrored structure on Park Avenue. She had always admired its clean lines, the way the morning sun bounced off the glass, the quiet elegance of its marble lobby. Today, however, it felt cold, foreign, almost hostile. The lobby smelled faintly of polished stone and expensive cologne. People passed by her without noticing the heaviness in her eyes, the slight tremble in her hands. She pressed the elevator button and stared at her reflection in the mirrored doors. A woman trying to look composed, failing miserably. On the 27th floor, the atmosphere was unusually tense. Conversations hushed the moment she walked in. A few co-workers exchanged glances, whispers spreading like thin smoke. Harper felt the weight of it, but forced a polite smile, greeting people the same way she always did. Her desk, tucked near a window overlooking the gray sweep of the East River, had always been her safe corner. She set her bag down and opened her laptop, trying to drown herself in spreadsheets and projections. Numbers had always calmed her. They were logical, dependable, nothing like the chaos in her heart. But she couldn't escape reality. Her manager, Ms.
Porter, approached with a stiff expression. "Harper, we need to talk. Conference room." The words sliced through her. Harper followed, feeling the stares burning into her back. Inside the glass-walled room, Ms. Porter closed the door gently, almost apologetically. "There have been concerns," she said carefully, "about your emotional state and your performance." Harper blinked. "My performance? I've never missed a deadline." Ms. Porter sighed. "Harper, Brad has been communicating certain things to the board, and with your recent absence of focus, the firm is reevaluating your position." A chill swept over Harper. Brad, of course. He wasn't done breaking her. Outside the conference room, she could see the skyline shimmering behind the glass, the city that had once felt full of promise, now pressing down on her like a weight. Little did she know, this was only the beginning of a storm designed to destroy her.
a storm she would one day rise above.
Brad Nolan had always been charming in the way dangerous men often were, smooth, confident, and hungry. Not the kind of hunger born from ambition, but the kind fueled by envy, by the constant belief that the world owed him something bigger, shinier, faster. For years, Harper mistook that hunger for drive. Now, she finally saw it for what it was, a weakness. That afternoon, as she stepped out of the conference room feeling small and shaken, Brad was miles away in a place that could not be more different from her reality.
He was standing under the chandelier glow of a luxury penthouse on Fifth Avenue, his arm casually linked with Cassandra Rhodes, the woman who had just promised him access to greater opportunities. The penthouse was filled with the soft hum of classical music and the quiet clink of crystal glasses. Cassandra moved across the room with practiced elegance, her heels tapping lightly against the marble floor. She wore power the way other women wore perfume, sharp, deliberate, expensive. Brad watched her with fascination, drinking in the way she commanded a room. He had always wanted to feel this important, this close to power. Harper never understood that, he told himself. She was too gentle, too content, too small. Cassandra turned to him, handing him a glass of champagne. "You made the right decision," she purred, her red lipstick curving into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. A man with your potential shouldn't chain himself to a woman who can't elevate you. Brad soaked in the praise, unaware, or unwilling to admit, that every word she spoke was poisoned honey.
"I knew you'd understand," he said, trying to mask the tremor of excitement in his voice. Cassandra's gaze sharpened. "But understand this, Brad. I open doors for people who open doors for me. Loyalty is transactional. You give me access to the right circles, and I give you the career you dream of." He didn't notice the chill beneath her words. He only heard career, dream, power. Brad lifted his glass, toasting to the new life he believed he had earned. He didn't care that Cassandra saw him as a tool. He didn't care whom he had hurt to get here. He didn't care that Harper, at that very moment, was fighting to keep her life from collapsing.
And he certainly didn't know that his betrayal was about to set off a chain of events he could never escape. A downfall waiting quietly in the shadows. The blow didn't come quietly. It arrived in the most humiliating way possible, public, cold, and devastating. Harper had barely returned to her desk when a notification lit up her phone. At first, she thought it was another calendar reminder or an email she'd forgotten to check. But the screen showed something far worse. A company-wide memo. Effective immediately, Harper Delaney is placed on administrative review due to emotional instability affecting workplace performance. Her breath caught. Her chest tightened. Emotional instability? Those weren't words you used casually in the finance world. They were a career death sentence. Harper clicked the attached report, her hands trembling. The notes were vague but cruel, hinting she had outbursts, breakdowns, and was unfit for client-facing work. None of it was true. Yet the memo had gone out to more than 200 employees. A soft murmur spread around the office like a slow-burning fire. People peeked over their monitors. 2 analysts whispered near the water cooler, casting glances her way. A junior associate quickly closed his Slack chat when she walked by, but not before she saw her own name highlighted in blue. Her heart thudded painfully. She tried to breathe, tried to steady herself, but the humiliation wrapped around her like fog. Ms. Porter approached again, eyes full of pity Harper didn't want. "Maybe take the rest of the day off," she suggested softly. Harper nodded, unable to speak. She walked toward the elevator,
each step heavy with the weight of a reputation crumbling.
When the silver doors slid open, she stepped inside, only to freeze. On the screen above the elevator buttons, playing silently on a news feed, was a video clip. Brad Nolan arriving at a high-profile fundraising gala the night before, Cassandra Rhodes on his arm. They looked radiant, confident, untouchable. The headline beneath them read, "Cassandra Rhodes seen with rising star executive Brad Nolan. New power duo?" Harper felt the world tilt sharply. Her stomach twisted. He hadn't just left her. He had walked straight into Cassandra's spotlight, into the life he always coveted. The elevator doors closed silently, trapping her with the image of Brad's triumphant smile. For him, this was a victory lap. For her, it was the moment she realized she had been thrown aside in every way possible, professionally, emotionally, socially. But what Harper didn't know was that this very moment, this worst humiliation of her life, would one day become the fire that forged her into someone Brad would regret losing forever. Harper didn't remember how she made it home. The city blurred around her, a mosaic of honking taxis, flashing billboards, and people who all seemed to know where they were going. Everyone moved with purpose. Everyone but her. When she finally reached her apartment, she shut the door softly behind her and let her back slide down until she sat on the floor. The quiet hit harder than the humiliation. It wrapped around her, pressing into her chest until she could barely breathe. She dropped her tote bag, its contents spilling across the hardwood. Her laptop, her planner, a crushed granola bar, the small silver ring Brad had given her on their first anniversary. She stared at it for a long moment, the memories stinging like salt in an open wound. She picked it up with shaking fingers, held it against her palm, and felt something inside her fracture further. Her phone buzzed. A message from her bank. "Your joint account ending in -0934 has been accessed." Her blood ran cold. She checked the app with trembling hands. Brad had emptied it. Every last dollar she'd saved over 5 years, gone. Rent, bills, groceries, all the little things she thought they'd built together, wiped out in seconds. Her breath hitched as the truth settled in. He hadn't just left her for someone else. He had taken everything she had left to stand on. The betrayal went deeper than she imagined, deeper than she was prepared to face. Tears blurred her vision. She pressed her hands to her face, trying to hold herself together as the reality crushed her. She wasn't just heartbroken. She was lost. Discredited at work, humiliated publicly, financially stripped, alone. She curled onto the floor, the cold seeping through her sweater. She didn't sob loudly. There was no dramatic wail, no explosion of sound. It was the quiet kind of crying. The kind that came from a wounded place inside the soul. The kind only people who have truly been betrayed understand. Her phone lit up again, this time an email. From Human Resources, subject, "Immediate suspension pending review." Another blow. Another piece of her life collapsing. Harper lay there for what felt like hours, staring at the ceiling, numb and trembling. She thought she had hit the bottom earlier that day. She was wrong. This moment on the cold floor was the true bottom. And she had no idea something even darker was coming. Night had settled over Manhattan like a velvet curtain when Harper finally forced herself off the floor. Her body felt heavy, her eyes raw, her throat sore from silent tears. She moved through the apartment mechanically,
picking up the scattered items from her bag. When she reached for her planner, an envelope slipped from between the pages and landed at her feet. Her heart paused. The envelope was ivory, embossed with a familiar crest she had not seen in years. The Delaney family seal. She hadn't expected to see it again. She hadn't wanted to. For a long moment, she simply stared at it, her breath shallow. Finally, with trembling fingers, she opened it. Inside was a letter written in delicate handwriting. Her mother's. My Harper, if you are reading this, it means you are facing a storm I can no longer shield you from. Her vision blurred instantly. Her mother had written this before she passed, leaving it with the family attorney with instructions to deliver it when Harper reached a place where the heart can't carry the burden alone. You were not meant to live small, sweetheart. You carry a legacy, an empire, but also a responsibility. One day, you will have to step into the world that frightened me so deeply, but you will do it with more courage than I ever had. Harper pressed a shaking hand to her lips. She felt the familiar ache of grief, but also something else, an old truth she had buried deep. Her mother had taken Harper far from the Delaney empire to protect her, to give her a normal childhood, to shield her from the ruthless expectations of a dynasty that valued power over people. But that world, that dynasty, had always been waiting for her. As she read on, the weight of her mother's words grew heavier. When the time comes, go to Ethan. He knows the path back. He will protect you when I cannot. Ethan. Her breath caught. So that was the connection. That was why he always seemed to appear when things got hard. That was why he looked at her with a depth she didn't understand. Her mother had trusted him. Entrusted him. A soft knock broke the silence, causing Harper to flinch. She froze, listening. Another knock, firmer this time. She approached the door cautiously, her pulse racing. When she opened it, her breath caught. Standing there was Ethan Mercer himself. His expression was grave. Harper, he said quietly, we need to talk. Tonight. And in that moment, she realized her life was about to change in ways she could not yet imagine. Ethan stepped into the apartment, his gaze sweeping over the scattered papers, the swollen eyes, the exhaustion etched into Harper's face. He didn't comment. He simply closed the door behind him and stood there with the quiet strength of someone who had watched her fall too many times in silence and decided tonight was the last. You read the letter, he said gently. Harper nodded, clutching her mother's handwriting as though it might slip away.
I didn't want this life, Ethan. I never wanted any of it.
I know, he said. Your mother knew, too. But she also knew you'd reach a point where the world would force you to stand up. Harper sank onto the couch, feeling a weight lift and settle all at once.
Brad destroyed everything. My job, my reputation, my savings. How am I supposed to stand up when I can't even breathe?
Ethan sat across from her, leaning forward. Because you're not who Brad thinks you are. You never were. You are Harper Delaney, the rightful heir to a legacy people in this city would kill to touch. She flinched. I didn't ask for any of it. No, he said softly. But it's yours. And people who don't ask for power are usually the ones who use it well. For the first time that night, something flickered inside her. Not anger, not grief, but a fragile spark of strength. Ethan reached into his coat and placed a sleek leather folder onto the table. This is the truth about Cassandra Rhodes. Her firm is bleeding money. She's pulling Brad into a failing empire,
And she's been manipulating your company's board for months. That memo they sent out today, it wasn't an accident. Harper's pulse quickened. She targeted me? She fears what you are, Ethan said simply, even without knowing your full identity. Harper stared at the documents, financial charts, emails, insider reports, proof of a scheme she never saw coming. Ethan's voice softened. I can help you if you let me. But this starts with one step.
One choice.
Harper swallowed hard. What choice?
To stop surviving, he said, and start reclaiming.
She looked around the apartment, at the wilted flowers on the counter, the empty space where Brad once stood, the fragments of a life she thought she wanted. Her heart still hurt, but her spine straightened. For the first time since Brad walked out, Harper exhaled with purpose. Fine, she whispered. Where do we start? Ethan's answering smile was quiet, but fierce. By becoming the woman they should have never underestimated. While Harper sat in her dim apartment, absorbing the truth Ethan laid bare, another scene unfolded miles away in a glittering penthouse overlooking Central Park. Brad Nolan stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, sipping a glass of aged bourbon he hadn't paid for, wrapped in the kind of luxury he believed he finally deserved.
Behind him, Cassandra Rhodes lounged on a white leather chaise, tapping through messages on her tablet. Her expression was sharp, calculating. The expression of a woman who viewed the world like a chessboard, every relationship a move, every person a piece.
So, Cassandra said, without looking up, our little problem at Harper's firm has been neutralized?
Brad smirked, swirling the bourbon in his glass. Completely. The memo went out this morning. Emotional instability, poor performance. No one will take her seriously again.
Cassandra finally lifted her eyes to him. You're sure she won't fight back?
Brad scoffed. Harper? She can barely stand up for herself, let alone fight. She'll disappear like she always does. Trust me, she's out of the way.
Cassandra studied him for a long, unsettling moment. You speak of her with such confidence.
Yet you lived with her for 4 years and didn't know a thing about her. Brad frowned slightly. What's that supposed to mean?
Nothing,
she said smoothly, though her eyes gleamed with suspicion.
I just find it interesting how blind men can be when they think they're in control.
Brad didn't like the tone, but he brushed it off, eager to return to the topic that fed his ego. Once your investors approve the new expansion, I'll have a real executive role, not the small-time job I had before. This, he gestured around the penthouse, is the life I was meant for.
Cassandra set her tablet aside and crossed her legs elegantly. Don't forget why you're here, Brad. I chose you because you're useful, because you're ambitious, because you're willing to do what others can't.
And I won't disappoint, he said quickly.
Her smile was thin.
See that you don't. She stood and walked toward the windows, joining him. The city lights glowed beneath them like scattered diamonds. What about Harper? Brad asked, more to reassure himself than her.
Cassandra's voice was cold and certain. She's irrelevant. But even as she said it, a flicker of doubt crossed her face, an instinct she couldn't yet explain. Because deep down, she sensed something Brad didn't. Harper Delaney was not gone. She was waking up. The next morning, Harper woke to a different kind of silence, one that no longer suffocated her, but instead left space for something new to take root. She stood in the mirror longer than usual, studying the woman staring back at her. Her eyes were tired, her cheeks pale, but beneath the exhaustion,
was a faint glimmer of something she hadn't seen in weeks. Resolve. She ran her fingers through her hair and took a slow, steady breath. "No more breaking," she whispered. "No more shrinking."
Ethan arrived just after sunrise, carrying 2 coffees and a look of determination. "We have a long road ahead," he said, handing her one. "So drink up. You'll need the energy." Harper managed a small smile and took a sip. The warmth grounded her. Ethan placed a sleek laptop on the table, a new MacBook Pro wrapped in a leather case. "This is yours. A clean slate. No spyware, no compromised accounts. We're starting fresh." Harper hesitated. "I can't accept this." "You're not accepting a gift," he said softly. "You're reclaiming your life. This is your tool." She opened the laptop slowly, the screen glowing to life like a silent promise. For the first time in days, she felt a faint spark of excitement in her chest. Ethan laid out a plan, structured, meticulous, and undeniably ambitious. "First, we clean your name.
Then, we expose what Cassandra is doing to your firm. After that, you decide whether to step into your birthright."
Harper shook her head.
"I'm not ready for that."
"You don't have to be ready," Ethan replied. "You just have to begin." He took her through financial reports, screenshots of private emails, patterns of market manipulation Cassandra was orchestrating. Harper listened carefully, absorbing every detail. Numbers had always calmed her, but today they ignited her. Every line of data, every spreadsheet told a story she was finally strong enough to confront. By late afternoon, she felt something shift inside her, a quiet awakening. She brushed her hair back, tied it into a neat twist, and changed into a simple black blouse. Not fancy, not flashy, but sharp. Ethan watched her with quiet pride. "There you are," he murmured. Harper's breath steadied.
What's next?
"We talked to someone on the inside," Ethan said. "Someone who can confirm exactly what Cassandra did." Harper nodded slowly, her heartbeat steady for the first time in days. She wasn't healed yet, but she was no longer broken. And for the enemies who thought she would stay down, that was the beginning of their biggest mistake. Harper had always carried her family name like a shadow, something she could feel behind her, heavy and unspoken, yet never acknowledged out loud. But as she sat across from Ethan in a quiet private lounge inside the Mercer Capitol Tower, the truth she had run from most of her life finally pressed forward. Ethan placed a thin folder on the polished table. The golden lamplight glinted off the embossed Delaney crest stamped at the top. Harper stared at it, her pulse quickening. "I kept this for you," Ethan said. "Your mother asked me to."
"She wanted you to have it when you were ready."
Harper swallowed hard.
"I don't know if I'm ready now."
"You're stronger than you think," he replied gently. With trembling fingers, Harper opened the folder. Inside were documents she had not seen since childhood. Photos of her parents beside boardroom tables, newspaper clippings about Delaney Fortune Group, handwritten notes from her mother about the responsibilities that would one day rest on Harper's shoulders. But the final document made her breath catch. A formal declaration naming her the future successor to the Delaney Empire. Her hands shook as she traced her mother's elegant signature. She remembered how her mother used to tuck her hair behind her ear and whisper that she didn't want Harper to grow up in a world where love was measured by stock value. That was why she raised her away from the Empire, why she protected her.
Harper blinked away tears.
"Why now, Ethan? Why did everything come crashing down at the same time?"
Ethan hesitated, not from uncertainty, but from the heaviness of the truth. "Because your father can no longer hold the board together without you.
There are power struggles inside the company, people trying to seize control, and Cassandra's expansion project threatens to destabilize everything. Your family's legacy is in danger. Harper's throat tightened. She never imagined stepping into that world again, much less saving it. But I don't know how to lead an empire, she whispered. You know more than you think, Ethan said. You've been studying numbers your whole life. You read markets like stories. You understand people better than any of those cold executives. And most importantly, he leaned closer, eyes steady. You care. That's what makes you different.
That's what your mother trusted.
A long silence settled between them, thick with memories and fears Harper had buried for years. Finally, Harper closed the folder, exhaling shakily.
What do I do now?
She asked. Ethan's answer was simple. You reclaim the throne that was always yours. Harper left the Mercer Capital Lounge with the Delaney folder pressed tightly against her chest, the weight of her legacy sinking into her bones. Outside, the Manhattan skyline glimmered against the night sky, towers of glass reflecting a world built on power, ambition, and ruthless competition. A world she had never wanted to be part of, yet one that kept pulling her back. Ethan walked beside her in silence. He didn't rush her. He didn't push. He simply let her breathe. They stopped near the steps of the building, where the soft glow of street lamps cast long shadows across the pavement.
Harper finally exhaled, the sound shaky.
I can't do this,
she whispered. Ethan turned to her.
Harper, no. She took a step back, shaking her head. I'm not stepping into that world. I watched it destroy my mother. I watched it harden my father. Everyone who touches that empire either becomes cold or breaks completely. Her voice cracked. I'm not built for it. Your mother didn't break, Ethan said gently. She chose love. She chose you. And look what it cost her, Harper whispered. Her eyes glistened. The board hated her. The press tore her apart. My father barely spoke to her at the end. I grew up watching a woman suffocate under Delaney expectations. Her throat tightened as the memories rushed back. Her mother's tired smile, her soft apologies when Harper found her crying behind closed doors, the constant storms of family politics.
Harper had sworn she'd never become part of it.
I can't lead an empire, she said, voice trembling. I can barely keep my life together right now.
Ethan stepped closer. You don't have to lead today. You don't even have to decide today. But you can't run from your name forever. It will always find you. Harper looked away, tears slipping down her cheeks.
Maybe, but I won't let my life be controlled by legacy. And I won't become the kind of person who measures worth in billions.
Harper, Ethan said softly, your worth isn't measured in billions. It's measured in how you rise. But she shook her head again, firmly this time.
No, I won't reveal who I am. I won't use my family's power to fight Brad or Cassandra. If I fight them, I'll do it as me, not as a Delaney.
For a moment, Ethan studied her with quiet admiration mixed with concern. Then he nodded.
If that's the path you choose, I'll walk it with you.
Harper didn't know it yet, but this refusal would spark consequences far larger than she could imagine. Brad Nolan never planned to be near Mercer Capital that afternoon. He'd only come downtown to pick up Cassandra's luxury skincare order from a high-end boutique nearby, a humiliating errand disguised as a favor she barked at him over breakfast. But fate had a strange way of placing the wrong man in the wrong place at the perfect moment.
As Brad stepped out of the elevator into the marble lobby of the Mercer Tower, he spotted two familiar silhouettes through the glass of a private lounge: Harper and Ethan Mercer. The sight alone stirred something ugly inside him, but when he saw the Delaney crest folder in Harper's hands, his steps faltered. He knew that symbol. Everyone in New York's business sphere knew it.
He moved closer, silently, staying just outside the line of sight. Their voices drifted through a slight opening in the glass door.
"I won't reveal who I am," Harper was saying, her voice steady despite the weight in it. "I won't use my family's empire to fight them."
Brad froze. Family's empire. Ethan answered calmly, "Harper, whether you claim it or not, you are still the rightful successor. The board will eventually force the issue. The Delaney legacy doesn't disappear just because you step back." Brad felt the blood drain from his face. Successor. Legacy. Delaney. But Harper had no money, no connections, nothing. Except she did. She always had. She just hid it. Stunned, Brad leaned a little closer, his heartbeat pounding in his ears. Harper whispered, "I don't want to hurt Brad or Cassandra. I just want to rebuild my life." Brad's jaw locked.
The idea that she had spoken his name with kindness, the same woman he had humiliated, betrayed, abandoned, made something sour twist in his stomach. Ethan continued, "No matter what you choose, I'm with you. But Brad and Cassandra should never have crossed you."
Brad's breath hitched. He stumbled back from the door, mind racing. Harper Delaney. Was that Delaney? A billionaire heiress? The hidden heir to a dynasty powerful enough to crush him with a single whisper? Suddenly, the penthouse, the parties, the praise Cassandra gave him, none of it felt secure anymore. If Cassandra discovered he had left a Delaney heir for her, if she realized he had mocked a woman worth more than her entire portfolio, he would be ruined. Not someday, immediately. Harper wasn't the weak link Cassandra believed. She was the storm. And Brad had walked straight into her path.
For the first time since leaving her, fear, cold, sharp, undeniable, wrapped itself around him. And he realized one devastating truth. He had betrayed the wrong woman. 3 days passed before Harper stepped foot anywhere near Midtown again. She had spent the time quietly rebuilding pieces of herself, sleeping a little, eating a little, breathing a little. But tonight she forced herself into a simple black coat and took a cab to the Ritz-Carlton, where Ethan arranged a discreet meeting with a former board member from her firm, willing to talk. The lobby was warm, glowing with soft amber light. Marble floors stretched out beneath gleaming chandeliers. Guests in tailored coats and evening dresses drifted through with murmured conversations and the faint scent of expensive cologne. Harper had always admired this place from afar. Luxury without ostentation, elegance without noise. She stepped toward the elevator when a too familiar voice echoed behind her. "Harper?" Her body stiffened. Brad. He stood near the concierge desk, clutching a monogrammed shopping bag, another errand for Cassandra, no doubt. But tonight his face looked different. Tense, pale, eyes darting with the frantic energy of a man cornered by his own mistakes. He walked toward her with a forced smile. I've been trying to reach you." Harper kept her posture calm, though a tremor ran through her chest. "There's nothing left for us to talk about." Brad stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Harper, please. Just hear me out. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know who you really were." There it was. The truth he couldn't hide behind charm or excuses. Harper's expression stayed steady. "And would it have mattered?
If you had known? Brad blinked, caught off guard. Of course it would have mattered.
I wouldn't have. He stopped himself, but the damage was done. Harper finished the sentence for him, her voice soft. You wouldn't have left. His jaw tightened, the facade cracking. Harper, I made a mistake. Cassandra. She's not who I thought. She's ruthless, controlling. She doesn't respect me. She uses you, Harper said gently, without cruelty. But you chose that. You chose her. You chose the life you thought was better. He reached for her arm. But now I realize what I lost. She stepped back before he could touch her. No, Brad. You lost the woman you thought was small. The woman you believed couldn't offer you anything. The woman you walked away from when she was at her weakest. Her voice steadied, strong and clear. And that woman doesn't exist anymore. Brad's face fell, hope draining out of his eyes. His lips parted, desperate for another chance.
But Harper turned away, walking toward the elevator with quiet grace, as the last shards of her old life crumbled behind her. And Brad Nolan, for the first time, understood what true regret tasted like. Cassandra Rhodes was not a woman easily rattled, but tonight her penthouse felt unusually small, as though the glass walls themselves were inching inward. Brad paced across the marble floor, running a shaking hand through his hair. The confrontation with Harper at the Ritz-Carlton replayed in his mind like a warning he couldn't shake. He had returned to Cassandra, hoping for reassurance, hoping she would help him salvage whatever future he thought he still deserved. But instead, she stood at the bar pouring herself a drink, her movements sharp and irritated.
Cassandra, listen, Brad said, voice trembling. We need to reconsider our strategy.
Harper, she's not who we thought she was. Cassandra's hand froze mid-pour. Slowly she turned, one eyebrow lifting in icy amusement.
We?
Brad swallowed. She's a Delaney. Harper Delaney. The Delaney heir. The glass slipped slightly in Cassandra's fingers before she regained her composure. Her jaw tightened, her eyes narrowing. You're lying. I heard it myself, Brad insisted. Ethan Mercer called her the successor. She has the documents, Cassandra. She's worth billions. For a long, dangerous moment, Cassandra said nothing. She set her drink down with a soft click, the kind of controlled movement that was far more terrifying than anger. So let me summarize, she said coldly. You left a Delaney heir, a woman with enough wealth and influence to bury half of Manhattan, so you could, what? Run errands for me? There was venom in every syllable. Brad flinched.
Cassandra, I didn't know.
No, she cut sharply.
You didn't know because you don't think. You don't ask questions. You don't look beyond your own ego.
She stepped closer, her heels echoing like a judge's gavel on marble. Brad backed up instinctively.
You were supposed to be an asset, Cassandra hissed. A charming accessory I could mold. Instead, you've become a liability.
Brad's heart pounded.
We can fix this. We can still—
You? She laughed, a brittle, elegant sound.
You can't even manage your own life, let alone salvage mine.
He reached for her hand, desperate.
Cassandra, don't do this. Don't throw me away.
She yanked her hand back with disgust.
You don't understand your position, Brad. I'm not throwing you away.
She walked to her desk, picked up a slim black folder, and tossed it at him.
I'm erasing you.
Inside were termination papers, non-disclosure agreements, and a note. Return all property by Monday. Access revoked. Brad stared at the papers, his world collapsing faster than he could breathe. Cassandra's voice chilled the air. You chose the wrong woman to betray, Brad Nolan. And now you will pay the price. Harper had avoided the Delaney estate for years. Even after her mother's death, even after her father's distant attempts to pull her back into the empire, she never crossed its iron gates. The estate in Connecticut symbolized everything she rejected: privilege without warmth, power without kindness, responsibility without love. But tonight, she sat in the back of Ethan's Mercedes as it rolled slowly up the long stone drive. Lanterns flickered along the path, illuminating the massive mansion perched above manicured lawns.
It looked like something carved from cold marble and old expectations. A world she had escaped, yet one that was always hers. Her stomach tightened. You don't have to be afraid, Ethan murmured, glancing at her.
I'm not afraid of the estate, Harper said quietly. I'm afraid of who I used to be here. The car stopped beneath the portico. The towering oak doors opened, revealing Charles Delaney, her father. Older now, hair silvered, posture still rigid with authority. For years, Harper had seen him as a statue more than a parent. But as she stepped out, his expression shifted, something like relief briefly softening the stern lines of his face. Harper, he said, voice low. Father. A long silence stretched between them, heavy with years of distance. He finally extended a hand, not commanding but inviting. She hesitated before placing her hand in his. It was unfamiliar, yet grounding.
Inside, the estate was exactly as she remembered. Oil paintings of ancestors lining the halls, chandeliers glimmering like suspended galaxies, the faint scent of aged wood and imported roses filling the air. But tonight, it felt different. Less like a cage, more like a crossroads. In the grand study, the Delaney board waited, gray suits, sharp eyes, ambition dripping from every stare. Harper felt their judgment immediately. She knew they believed she was unprepared, unworthy, too emotional, too soft. Her father stood beside her. Before we begin, he said, addressing the room, understand this. My daughter is no longer a child. She is the rightful heir, and she will not be dismissed. A ripple of surprise spread across the faces at the table. Harper's heart pounded. She hadn't agreed to lead. She had barely agreed to come home. But she felt the shift, the gravity of the moment. This wasn't about Brad or Cassandra anymore. It was about her mother's legacy, her own future, the life she deserved to claim or abandon. She stepped forward, lifting her chin. Let's begin, she said softly. Not a surrender, a beginning. The Plaza Hotel shimmered like a jewel against the Manhattan night, its golden lights spilling across Fifth Avenue as limousines lined up beneath the iconic awning. Inside, the annual Financial Titans Gala was already in full swing, crystal chandeliers glowing, champagne flowing, violins weaving through the air. It was a room built for power, for legacy, for those who believed the world bowed beneath their footsteps. Tonight, Harper Delaney walked into that room for the first time as herself. She stepped out of the black Mercedes and onto the red carpet, wearing a deep emerald gown that hugged her figure with quiet elegance. No diamonds, no flashy displays, just a single sapphire pendant that once belonged to her mother. Ethan walked beside her in a tailored charcoal suit, offering silent strength. The moment Harper entered the grand ballroom, conversations faltered. Heads turned, cameras flashed. People who once ignored her, once whispered about her instability, now stared with the kind of reverence reserved for royalty. Because they recognized the crest on the invitation she carried.
The Delaney crest. Whispers rippled through the air like wind through leaves. Harper Delaney? Her? The successor? I thought she was just an analyst. Why didn't we know? Harper kept her posture steady, chin lifted, steps graceful across the polished floor. Inside, her heart beat hard, but not from fear, from acceptance. Tonight was not a performance. It was truth.
Across the room, Brad Nolan froze mid-sip, champagne sloshing over the rim of his glass. His face drained of color. Cassandra at his side followed his gaze and nearly dropped her clutch. There she was. Not the fragile woman Brad abandoned, not the nobody Cassandra dismissed, but the heiress they should have never provoked. Brad stumbled toward her, ignoring Cassandra's grip on his arm. Harper, wait. But Harper didn't break her stride. She walked straight past him, toward the board members, investors, and industry giants who now jockeyed for her attention. Cassandra's lips tightened. She approached Harper with deliberate steps, forcing a smile. "Well," she said coolly, "you hid yourself well." Harper met her gaze without flinching. "I didn't hide. I simply didn't owe anyone an explanation." Cassandra opened her mouth to speak, but Harper gently cut her off. "And for the record," she added softly, "taking down an empire built on manipulation won't be difficult. You've already cracked the foundation yourself." A murmur spread through the watching crowd. This was no longer the Harper they remembered. This was the woman she was born to be. And the room, the Plaza Hotel, the titans of finance, the world felt the shift. Brad Nolan had never felt small in a room, until tonight. As Harper moved through the Plaza ballroom with effortless grace, the glittering world he desperately wanted to belong to shifted around him. People who once looked at him with mild interest now brushed past as though he were invisible. Their eyes followed Harper, not him. Their whispered conversations circled her name, not his. He watched helplessly as industry giants leaned in to speak with her, as board members bowed slightly in respect, as Ethan stood confidently by her side, like a man who belonged at her shoulder. Brad felt something cold creep into his stomach. Not jealousy, not exactly, but the dawning realization that he had stepped off a cliff without knowing it. He tried to approach again. "Harper, please, just give me a minute." She turned her head slightly, her expression soft but distant, the kind of look you give a stranger asking for directions. "Brad," she said gently, "this isn't the place." He shook his head, desperation rising. "I made a mistake, okay? I didn't know who you were." Her eyes sharpened. "That's exactly the point. You didn't care who I was unless it benefited you." Around them, a few guests slowed their steps, sensing a scene. Brad's pulse hammered. "I loved you," he insisted. Harper held his gaze, unflinching. "You loved what you thought I lacked. You loved being the one with more power." Brad's face reddened. "Harper." Before he could finish, Cassandra swept over, her smile tight as a wire. "Brad, stop embarrassing yourself." He turned to her. "You knew, didn't you, about Harper, about the Delaney empire?" Cassandra didn't deny it. "I suspected, but I didn't think she mattered." Harper's gaze turned icy. For the first time, Cassandra faltered. Brad stepped closer to Harper, voice cracking. "Please, just tell me there's a chance. Tell me we can fix this." Harper took a slow breath, her voice soft, but carrying the sharpness of truth. "Brad, the man I loved is gone, and the man standing in front of me is someone I don't recognize." A hush fell around them.
Brad felt the ground drop beneath him. Harper finished quietly. I hope you learned from this. Truly. But we are done. Then she turned away, calm, steady, radiant. Ethan placed a gentle hand on her back as they moved toward the stage. Brad stood frozen in the center of the ballroom, cameras catching every second, whispers swelling around him like a rising tide. And it hit him with crushing clarity. He hadn't just lost a woman. He had lost his future. When Harper stepped onto the small stage at the center of the plaza's grand ballroom, the room shifted. The murmurs faded, the clinking glasses quieted, and even the orchestra seemed to soften into a gentle hum. It wasn't because she demanded attention. Harper never had to. It was the stillness around her, the quiet dignity she carried, the kind of presence that didn't need to be loud to be powerful. Ethan stood just behind her, not overshadowing, but supporting, the way someone does when they know the moment isn't theirs. Lights reflected off the chandeliers above them, bathing Harper in a soft gold glow that made her look almost ethereal, yet grounded, real, unmistakably strong. The event host cleared his throat. Ladies and gentlemen, we are honored tonight by the presence of Harper Delaney, the future leader of one of America's oldest financial legacies. A wave of astonishment rippled through the crowd. Cameras flashed. Investors leaned forward. Some gasped softly, as if finally understanding the woman who had walked into their world with quiet steps, but undeniable power. Harper took a breath, speaking into the microphone with calm clarity. I wasn't planning to stand before you tonight. My life these past weeks has been complicated, painful, revealing. But sometimes life doesn't wait for us to be ready. Sometimes it pushes us to rise. The honesty in her voice struck something tender in the audience. This was not a cold heiress or a polished executive. This was a woman who had survived betrayal, humiliation, and heartbreak, and turned it into strength. I am not here tonight as a symbol, Harper continued, not as the heir of anything. I stand here as a woman who learned that losing everything can sometimes show you what matters. She paused, eyes scanning the room. They landed briefly on Brad. His face was a storm, regret, disbelief, devastation. Harper didn't linger. My family name may open doors, she said, but character keeps them open, and I plan to honor both. The crowd erupted into applause, genuine, warm, thunderous. Ethan stepped beside her, placing a hand lightly on her back as she descended the stage. Pride filled his eyes, but so did something deeper, something gentle, something patient. Harper felt it too. Not in the grand, sweeping way romance appears in movies, but in the quiet understanding between two people who had weathered storms side by side. Tonight, she didn't just reclaim her power, she reclaimed herself, and the world finally saw her for who she truly was. The morning after the gala, Manhattan felt different. Not louder, not brighter, simply clearer, as though the city itself had shifted to make space for the woman Harper had become. News outlets lit up with headlines about her return to the Delaney legacy. Investors praised her poise, analysts dissected her potential leadership, and the financial world buzzed with an excitement that had nothing to do with drama and everything to do with respect. But justice still had a path to walk. By midday, Cassandra Rhodes's empire began to crumble. The board of her firm, alerted by Ethan's carefully gathered evidence, launched a full internal investigation. Articles surfaced revealing her attempts to manipulate market positions and undermine competing companies, including Harper's former workplace. People who had once bowed to her, now distanced themselves in fear. Cassandra herself received the final blow. Her investment license was suspended pending review. For a woman who lived on power, it was a death sentence. Brad Nolan fared no better. Cassandra severed all ties, leaving him without a job, without connections, without the protection he once enjoyed. Recruiters rejected his applications the moment they glimpsed the scandal attached to his name. Even the penthouse keycard he carried so proudly no longer worked. He tried calling Harper, once, twice, 10 times. She never answered. Some lessons demand silence.
Meanwhile, Harper spent the day at the Delaney Foundation offices, reviewing proposals for initiatives supporting women facing financial abuse and professional sabotage. She read each case with steady hands, but a tender heart. She knew what it meant to lose everything. She also knew what it meant to rise. As evening spilled across the sky, Ethan joined her on the rooftop garden overlooking the Manhattan skyline. City lights shimmered like constellations brought to Earth. Harper leaned against the railing, breathing in the cool air, light, free, whole. "You did something extraordinary today," Ethan said softly. Harper smiled. "I didn't do it alone." Ethan hesitated before stepping closer. "Your mother would be proud." Those words, gentle, simple, brought warmth to her eyes. She turned to him, seeing not the CEO, not the strategist, but the man who had stood beside her through the darkest storm of her life. A quiet moment passed. Then Ethan reached into his coat and revealed a small velvet box, not flashy, not oversized, just elegant. "Harper," he said, voice steady, "I don't expect an answer tonight, or tomorrow. But if one day you're ready, I'd be honored to walk beside you, not as an advisor, not as an ally, but as a partner." Harper's breath caught. Hope, not fear, filled her chest. For once, the future didn't scare her. It invited her. And Harper Delaney finally stepped toward the life she truly deserved. So, the story has come to an end. And hey, wonderful friends, if you're still here with me, really, there's something in this story that's touching your heart in some way, right? Maybe it's Harper's resilience. Maybe it's seeing someone rise after betrayal. Maybe it's just the reminder that life isn't always fair, but how we respond makes all the difference. In a way, what we just watched reminds me of something Marcus Aurelius once said. "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Harper didn't rely on luck. She didn't chase revenge blindly. She faced pain, reflected, and used her insight and patience to rebuild herself. And that's something we can all take into our own lives. When people let us down, when circumstances crush us, we still have the power to control our choices, our mindset, and how we rise. So if this story hit a chord with you, maybe take a moment today to reflect on your own strength, the obstacles you've overcome, and the resilience you carry within. And if you felt inspired, even a little, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, so we can keep exploring these stories that remind us we're stronger than we think. This story is a work of fiction, created purely for entertainment and inspirational purposes. All characters, events, and situations depicted are fictional, and any resemblance to real people or actual events is purely coincidental. The narrative explores themes of resilience, personal growth, and self-empowerment, following the journey of Harper Delaney as she navigates betrayal, challenges, and the discovery of her true potential. The story draws inspiration from Stoic philosophy, highlighting how individuals can find inner strength through reflection, patience, and rational thinking, even when facing adversity. It is intended to inspire viewers to consider their own capacity for growth,
self-awareness, and perseverance in everyday life. The content encourages audiences to reflect on personal challenges, understand the power of mindset, and embrace opportunities for emotional and professional growth while remaining a safe and positive source of entertainment.